Smoke signals from around the campfire.
What is politically impossible today becomes politically inevitable tomorrow. We rebel together in all our wonderful weirdness, all our wonderful madness, and in the spirit of the most embarrassing word in the English language, love. We rebel in love for each other. We rebel in love for our wonderful living world. We rebel in love for the better people we can become.
Back at Extinction Rebellion. This is my third rebellion in London in a year. And my first thought was, where is everyone? That was soon answered as I headed down Whitehall. Lots of people gathering, drummers out in force, and whispers of George Monbiot about to take to the stage. The stage being the War Memorial outside Downing Street.
We've been trained to believe that we can't change the world, and we are here to demonstrate that we can. We cannot continue to live under this system. So we either die under this system or we change this system. We are here to overthrow an earth-destroying system and replace it with one in harmony with the earth system. In harmony with the living world. In harmony with the needs of all humanity now and in the future. And for this, we cannot accept the current dispensation. For this, we cannot compromise and negotiate with those who recognise only their temporary political reality hand. Either they do what is necessary to protect our lives, to protect the lives of this species with which we share this wonderful planet, to protect our life support systems, or they don't. And if they don't, we get rid of them and bring in a new lot.
This movement doesn't really have a figurehead. There's one person we should be giving props to, not least for his ability to string together a pretty good speech and to inspire and motivate people around him. It's Monbiot, a man dismissed in a meeting I had a year or so ago with the Observer's political editor Toby Helm as being out of touch and somewhat of a relic of 90s activism. Monbiot certainly found his space and time now within the Extinction Rebellion movement, and many are stepping up, or rising up, in the face of one of our biggest ever challenges. Red is blood and conveys energy which, when combined with the white visage, triggers a number of potential associations, from Greek tragedy to the apparitions from a dream or a nightmare. The message is opaque, they're potentially frightening but possibly uplifting. They're mythical and timeless, but in the moment. The intention, however, is clear. They're channeling the Furies and the Guardians. The ancestors are warning us, trying to wake us up before it's too late.
So the shape of progress is no longer endless growth. It's balance in the donut, a metaphor we profoundly understand in our own bodies. Our health lies in balance. Have enough food, enough exercise, water, oxygen, calories, but not too much of any of them. Health lies in balance at the human body, and the same is true for the planetary body. We need to find a balance we have never found before that meets the needs of all people within the means of the planet. And here in the UK, this is particularly incumbent upon us. Ours was the first nation into the Industrial Revolution. We have a moral imperative to lead again and to be the first nation out. This city and many cities in the United Kingdom were built not only on the extraction of Earth's resources, but we know on the extraction of energy and unpaid labor from people from all around the world. It's the historical inheritance of an empire. And if we want to engage in reparative acts, one of the first we can do is to get out of the fossil fuel economy and show that we are committed to moving fast, far faster than 2050, far faster. That's why we're here, because even though the government believes that they are showing leadership by committing to net zero carbon by 2050, that's way past where we all know that we need to be. So let's be the first in and the first out of the Industrial Revolution. I leave you with donut economics, and let's open this up to a conversation. If anybody wants to come with a question or a comment or a critique, very welcome. Thank you.
Outbursts of spontaneous song are very much part of the Extinction Rebellion experience, and I came across this joyous song, "We Are Family, We Are Together," as I walked around the fringes of the St James's Park site on the first day. A year ago, my first rebellion on Westminster Bridge, I was struck by the way a meditation could spontaneously take place in amongst the chaos of central London and the hustle and bustle. This happened again in Trafalgar Square, late on Monday afternoon, as the samba drummers ran riot. Here were the meditators.
How are you feeling?
Okay.
Good. It's not uncomfortable.
Huh?
It's not uncomfortable.
Oh, it's dry and
Yeah. You need a drink or anything to eat?
a cup of tea would be very
Cup of tea.
with milk and sugar.
Tea with milk and sugar. Are there other people at the other?
No, I
side?
think I'm the
Just
only-
you. You're just you.
I just thought, I don't know. I first did a bit clips, but they already took them, and I'm now with tape.
Well done.
And so on to Tuesday, and I was tipped off at short notice by an ex-police chief superintendent, Rob Cooper, who I'd met up with spontaneously on Monday, that there'd be the first People's Assembly taking place actually in Parliament.
Play a central role in all government departments and their policies.
And we just want to talk to you about the Home Office and its connections with climate breakdown. By way of introduction, I'm a former chief superintendent, and a few years ago now I took an oath to the Queen to serve my community, and if the Prime Minister wants to call me an uncooperative crusty, then I'll take that badge and I will wear it with pride. Okay, so yeah, my police experience, I know what an emergency looks like. I know how important it is. You hear in the NHS, you hear about this golden hour dealing with critical incidents, and it's very much the same in the police. And just to put that in the context of climate breakdown, you know, if you're behind the curve, you have to run like mad to catch up, because until you catch up with whatever it is you're dealing with, and until you get in front of it, you will actually never deal with it. And we are so far behind the curve, we can't even see it. So that's the context that we're operating in.
You know, sometimes when people talk about this government of national unity, they sidle up to me and say, "Ooh, how would you like to be Minister for the Environment?"
The Assembly was convened by Extinction Rebellion with much help and cooperation from MPs, such as Clive Lewis from the Shadow Treasury and Caroline Lucas, Brighton Pavilion MP, who spoke at the meeting.
Let's follow the science, let's follow the truth. And let's just basically get away from thinking that what we're talking about is something that is outside of ourselves, and what we're talking about is actually something that absolutely affects all of us inside of ourselves as well.
Thank you so much.
And what central government needs to do is provide the funding and the framework and the tactics, and then what local politicians and local people need to do is work out what works for them. How do they get there in a just way to to their ultimate goal. And I think that's something that is going to be very difficult amongst politicians and political parties, which have always understood power to be gathering all the levers to themselves. You've got to let 1,000 flowers bloom, and that's going to be critical. Another thing I wanted to talk about was part of our Green New Deal, and what we're doing in that. In many ways, to my mind, this is what I would call emergency socialism. And there are lots of people that want to define what socialism is. They want to use really hard and awful examples from the 20th century. My view is that the socialism of the 21st century will be defined by this generation and the next, and I think it will be a positive thing. Because when you say emergency socialism, and I've done this before at places, you get a reasonable show of hands. If you say, do you think emergency socialism or socialism is a good thing, and you get a reasonable show of hands. If you then ask them, do you think the NHS is a good thing, you get everyone's hand going up. And that's the closest thing to socialism we've had in this country, because it prioritises people and their health collectively over profit and private good. And although the government are trying to change that, that was at its inception, the NHS was the closest thing this country has ever had to socialism. And it puts people's health collectively first. Well, we want something which is going to put people and planet and our society first. And that's the kind of socialism I think people can buy into. It's about redefining what that socialism is, telling people what our socialism in the 21st century will look like. Another really big area, I think, and John McDonnell has mentioned this twice now, so it means he's serious about it, is the issue of technology and know-how transfer to the developing world. And I'm really, really strong on, I'm really passionate about this, and it's something I want to work up a lot more, because what I understand is that it doesn't make a difference what we do in this country, what we do in Europe, even what we do in the US. If the developing world cannot make the jump from the 20th into the 21st century without going through the dirty stage that we have, we're all in trouble, okay? So, we're all in trouble. So what we've got to do is that we've got to understand that the only way we're going to navigate our way as a global society to see the other side of the 21st century into the 22nd is if we can cooperate. And that means that you are not going to be trying to make a fast buck of some of the poorest people in the world who are suffering now because of our history, because of our industrialization, our carbon output, and our intensive farming techniques, and the economic system that we have imposed on the world in the last 40 years. Those people must not be able to pay for that. We have to help them make that jump. And that's something which I don't think politicians in the United States or across Europe are actually talking about anywhere near enough, and that's something that we're going to have to. And the last thing I'm going to say is about the Treasury needing to help structure resilience within our society. And I don't just mean economic resilience, I also mean political and social resilience, because there are going to be systemic shocks that hit us. There are going to be more demagogues, more fascists, more attacks on our democracy, and we have to make sure that our democracy is also resilient to those challenges in the future.
Thank you so much. So these were our speakers for today to make it reflect on what the plan needs to be. What's the plan is the question. What's your plan when you're thinking about different departments?
No law, no decision, no commitment, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go forth with this council that will harm the children now or ever.
The first is how can we put in place systems that educate our young people, particularly the urban young people, to get an understanding of what food actually is and how it is produced, and build that connection. And the second part of that same question is is education. So children, especially in city areas, and farmers who are currently the decision makers and the ones that are making stuff happen on the ground. How do we get education out to them to transition to carbon neutral farming systems? So the second one is, how do we put in place research, exploratory research, to develop these ideas, mainstream these ideas and make them happen? The third is, how do we put in place local food networks connecting producers and consumers, be it private people or schools or organisations, online food directories, resilience to reduce dependence on imports, build our local production systems, creating local employment as much as we possibly can for young entrants into farming, and we need to get on with it right now.
Thank you so much, David. Do we have another circle for DEFRA? Can't remember now. Yes, we did. No, okay. So do you want to carry on here? We have housing. Is it housing?
Just before we do, I'm just going to mention we've got 16 minutes before we close. I think we've got about 9 groups. We can do the maths, so that's probably a couple of minutes each.
Okay.
Okay, 3 questions for housing. How will you plan and fund to retrofit the UK's existing building stock? How will you plan and fund all new builds to be zero carbon, carbon negative, and have net gain of biodiversity? And how will you move to price parity between electricity and gas? We also were working on energy, which maybe Jules can extemporise.
Yeah, business energy and industrial strategy, really from Dale. Why aren't we allowed to build onshore wind? Why are fossil fuels subsidised and the renewable energy taxed? Those are my questions. Our questions for days.
Thank you, Jules. Then did we have here? We had, is it transport and education? I don't know which one you put in.
Yes, 2.
Go ahead. Go on.
No. Okay. How will you fund lifelong skills training for sustainable development? When are we going to realise that transport is about moving people, not vehicles? And why is all the power in Whitehall so kind of a call for decentralisation?
Thank you so much. And I'll move over here. What did we have here?
Oh, the Treasury.
What?
Treasury.
Treasury, please, go ahead.
Okay, so what do we need to change to implement a Green New Deal? How do we break the stranglehold of a centralised spending policy? And do we need a new codified constitution to guarantee and clarify our rights and the role of power?
Thank you so much. We had another treasury here. Is that right?
Yeah.
So we've got 3. One is, how does the Treasury ensure the country stays within its resource and carbon budget in a just and equitable manner globally applicable? How do we harmonise monetary and fiscal policy to accord with the necessity of global climate and ecological justice? And the third one is, how does the Treasury tackle the power of the 1%?
Okay, lovely, thank you. And what did we have in that corner?
So we'd like to ask the Home Office, will you take this seriously and will you take the lead on acting as if there is an emergency? Secondly, will you set up a cross-departmental task force and be prepared to share your budget? And thirdly, when the shit hits the fan, how can you be sure that the police distribute, the police are responsible for a fair distribution system?
Thank you so much, Peter. And then we had one more here, which was
health. Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll ask to the Department of Health, how do you plan to ensure that we change the culture and environment that people are living in to maximise prevention of ill health and promote physical and mental well-being, and that this is embedded as a requirement in all government departments? 2, what is your plan for dealing with the direct and indirect health effects of the climate crisis? And finally, how will you ensure the NHS and its supply chains are effectively decarbonised by 2025?
Thank you so much. So I would like to collect all the notes that you've taken in each group. That's okay.
We await the outcomes of the People's Assembly with great interest, but it was a historic occasion to actually be in Parliament, and a great achievement for the group, proving that progress is really being made. So here we are at Downing Street, cradle of our government, and this is Whitehall, which is a bit of a campsite really. Extinction Rebellion stronghold, one of the many in central London. Samba band playing down the road.
Who would like to sign a letter to Mr. Johnson?
We might get into trouble.
We're asking him to come and talk to us about the climate emergency. Wherever you may be, I am the Lord of the Dance.
There are more than 1 million species on the extinction list. 2 million species go extinct each day. We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. And unlike any other extinction before this, one species is responsible for the destruction of all other life on the planet. It is a hard time to be a part of the human species. We are called on to resist so much.
This is a movement for everybody, there's a space for everybody. Now that doesn't mean that everybody likes our tactics, and people don't have to like us in order to start talking about the crisis. What happens if you stand passively by the side of the road with a placard saying, you know, stop climate change, is you just get ignored. When you get on the street and block it, people start to have a conversation about this existential situation that we're in. When we say existential threat, what we mean is we're in an apocalyptic situation. You have to use biblical language to talk about what it means to be in a 6th mass extinction event, and that's the only way to get that information over to people that I understand anyways to be disruptive. And when people say, well, we agree with your message but we don't like how you're doing it, my general answer is, like, if you've got a better plan, tell us, because literally we've tried all the other stuff, writing to our MPs and our politicians and doing petitions and going on marches. I don't see what else there is other than getting on the streets. And frankly, as this crisis worsens and we face things like food shortages, you know, the academic term actually is multi-breadbasket failure, when across the planet either droughts or floods mean that the farms can no longer produce enough food. When we're facing that and literally people are fighting over tins of beans in the supermarket, people are going to wonder why more of us were on these streets in these times.
Whereas actually democracy needs to be everywhere. It needs to become not just a thing we do sometimes, but the framework within which we live. And that our relationships with each other should be fundamentally democratic at all times. And that's a whole mindset, that's a whole change in global perspective we need if we're to shift into that space. But who fundamentally would disagree that that should be our governing value? You have read Roger Hallam's little book, by the way, Common Sense in the 21st Century, and showing how you moved in really just a very few months from a situation of apparent hopelessness to complete revolutionary change, where you broke the system which looked initially unbreakable. And he's tried to sort of use those examples to produce a formula for effective democratizing action. And I think his attempt is very successful. I think he is very persuasive, the way he has spelt out the means by which we do this. And a lot of it we see in the philosophy of Extinction Rebellion, that we're talking about mass actions in the centre of the capital city, ideally involving thousands of people. You create what are called dilemma actions. Are people here familiar with that term? Some of you? So a dilemma action is one where you put the authorities in an impossible position. Either you've occupied the streets in such numbers and you've remained completely peaceful and completely friendly, either they let you continue, which then encourages other people to come and join your action, or they start hammering you and repressing you, and the example of sacrifice set by those people encourages other people to come and join the action. So they can't win. And if you get that right, then that dilemma action is just going to snowball and snowball until you've basically created a revolution. And the way he's done it, and I really like his thinking here, is he sort of looked at how that revolution you create becomes a democratic revolution. It doesn't lead to some new dictatorship or a military coup, because we've seen plenty of that happening, especially in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. And I think it goes quite a long way towards describing a genuinely democratic revolution. And that, my friends, is what we're here for. Thank you. May we have a brilliant Extinction Rebellion.
Many mainstream commentators have been mocking the rebels, particularly for their art and entertainment that they've been doing whilst holding the streets of London for hours and days. Piers Morgan in particular was making fun of some young people who were doing mime theatre on the streets, quipping that they were on some sort of drugs, when in fact the policy of Extinction Rebellion is strictly no alcohol, no drugs. There's much entertainment to be had though, as many of us are there for many hours, as can be evidenced in these videos. Fun on the streets and protest at the same time. It doesn't diminish the message.
This is an important announcement. Could you please turn around to someone you've never met before and give them a hug immediately? Thank you.
After 4 days of intense activity, I left London with something of a heavy heart on Thursday afternoon to go back into the real world. When I got home, I turned on the television for the first time in weeks, and Rupert Reed, spokesperson for XR, was actually on Question Time and making a good performance of it. Simultaneously on Newsnight on BBC Two, there was a mini documentary and discussion around Extinction Rebellion. And with further actions planned during the week at City Airport, at Billingsgate Fish Market, around the Bank of England and in the city, there's no way this movement is going away. Its impact is spreading its wings far and wide, and it needs to.
Emphasize to you as people here that anybody here can start up their own community energy project in their local area. It can be where you live, kind of in, on your house or in your local community, but can also be in your workplace, at your school, at your place of worship, at your GP surgery, literally anywhere. So just really want you to feel empowered to be able to do it yourself.
After checking out the family area and creche, it was time to take in another People's Assembly in Trafalgar Square. This one a little bit bigger than the one we'd had in Parliament.
Okay, I would like to ask everybody that would like to participate in this People's Assembly in the middle of the road in Trafalgar Square on this beautiful day of rebellion to get themselves into small circles of about 8 to 10 people. If you have facilitated before, maybe put your hand up so that people can gather around you as an experienced facilitator. And if any of your groups need any help or clarification, just put your hand up and one of us will come round and check in with you.
What we got from our little chat was massive importance, and one of Extinction Rebellion's really important demands that we start setting up and go for a real good citizens' assembly. Just so important. All of us too have friends, family that we talk to about this, and they're just sitting on the fence. They agree with us, they come from the right backgrounds, but they're just sitting on the fence. And we're still an organisation growing massively in momentum, so don't give up speaking to these people. Get them on board, and we'll be back in April. We'll be back next October until we win.
Everybody say welcome to Claire.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for being here. All of us matter. Everybody that shows up, regardless of if you do nothing except stand here, makes a statement. So our group over here, we decided that the most important thing was that the government understands that it has a moral and a legal imperative to take care of us, to take care of our planet, to take care of our children's future, and that they must act now, and that this is something we can do around the world together, and in fact it's the only way it's going to work, because this is one planet and one being. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone. So I feel like I'm repeating what everyone is saying, but that's just fantastic because it means that there's so many like-minded people here today. So the main thing we wanted to take away in my group is just that everyone can do something, no matter how small, and that if we're doing something small, and lots of people are doing something small, that's what's going to lead to system change, to systemic change all around the world. So taking our responsibility and doing what we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anyone been counting?
I'm wondering how many different groups we've got feeding back. This is amazing. Everybody, this is Pat.
In our group, we were considering calling into question the idea of cooperation between government and individual that Extinction Rebellion have been suggesting. But basically, we thought that for too long have the government been imposing responsibility upon the individual, and it's time that Extinction Rebellion continue to force legislative processes. And unlike the Tory government, we need the Climate Department back in place and for Extinction Rebellion to continue its good work. Thank you.
Thank you. On that note, for anybody that isn't aware of it, I would urge you all to look up the 3 Demands Bill to get an idea of what is actually being done on that front. Everybody, this is Dick.
Hello. So, firstly, our group wanted to acknowledge that this process was difficult and it was hard to reconcile all the different opinions that we had. And I think that's a really important point about people's assemblies and the work that needs to go into making them work well, maybe. The thing that we did come up with, the point we want to make, is that we want people to reflect on this idea of, if not you, then who? Does that make sense? Thank you very much. Sorry, I was really nervous.
Thank you so much. Everyone say hello to Charlotte.
Hi. So our group also came up with many messages. One of them being, it is really hard, isn't it? But if we listen and share, and on the subject of listening, our message to those above us would be, listen to the experts, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody, this is Laura. Can we remember to give some appreciation? You're doing really well. Well, let's really appreciate these note takers coming up. I can feel and hear how nervous some of them are to come and stand in front of such a big crowd and to be broadcast around the world. So let's really remember this is a bit nerve-wracking and they're doing amazing work.
So one of our main points was to force the government and the people in power to tell the truth. We all have the right as human beings and as living things to understand what's happening to our Mother Earth, so we can all unite together for its reconstruction.
Thank you. This is Joe, everyone. He's a very lovely human being who I've encountered many times before, and he just gave me a hug, so I really appreciate him. Here he is.
Hello everyone. I think it's quite pertinent that the police are dragging away the hearse with a coffin that labelled Our Future on it at the moment. But our group basically came up with a few points. The one with the most agreement was to acknowledge that we all feel guilt and not to internalise that, but to externalise that as love and rage at the system. And to acknowledge how empowering it is when you do read up on the facts. You learn about how scary the system is that we live, how scary climate change is, but how you can do something and how to become active, how to get on the street, learn your rights, know how to engage with the police, and come together in communities. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Rosie.
Hi. Our group decided we need more urgency, we need new leadership. They're not treating this like the emergency that it is.
Thank you. Everybody, this is Roy.
Hello. We spoke about a few things and then tried to combine them into a succinct point. And that is that people in southern hemisphere countries such as Indonesia and the West Indies are already suffering much more severe effects of climate change. Our media isn't telling the truth about this, and we probably shouldn't expect them to be telling the truth about what's going to happen to us in the not so distant future.
Thank you very much. This is Sophia, everyone.
Hi guys. Okay, so we decided on a few things. I think one of the main things that came up though was about publicising system change rather than individual change, educating the public about how important and realistically challenging this is, but we can overcome it. I think it's something important to say about, despite how realistically ominous this whole climate crisis is, it's creating the hope that we can come together and do this, and being approachable and as friendly as you can to everyone you meet. Thank you.
Thank you.